Hopefully you're going to leave inspired to create your own ways in your place with your community, but also to get yarning, keep yarning or start yarning. So Kim and I, I'll introduce Kim in a minute, are going to share stories of our understanding and what the things that we know, but I keep in mind as we go that there are many ways of knowing and many different perspectives. So you're just hearing Kim and mine today. So for those of you who don't know, KidsMatter is a mental health initiative. It's funded by the Australian Government, Department of Health. Our KidsMatter partners here at Early Childhood Australia, who the KidsMatter team work for, are Beyond Blue and the Australian Psychological Society. So if you are new to the KidsMatter space, you might not know about the chat. If you've been here before, you know all about the chat because we usually have lots of people engaging in the chat. So if you would like to participate in the yarn in the chat, then feel free to write your messages to us and or to each other, and some of our KidsMatter team will be in the chat as well, offering some resources, and they might send you some links and that kind of thing and respond to some of your questions as well. So if you don't want the chat, if it's too busy and that's not the way that you like to experience webinars, you can minimise it, or you can just focus on what's happening on screen and the things that Kim and I are talking about and yarning about. If you do need some technical help, there's also some help. Kathy is around to help you with that as well. So she will just write that in the chat too, and she'll help you out as much as she can. So let's get going. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm meeting for this webinar on Kaurna land. I'd like to pay my respects to Kaurna people, particularly Kaurna elders past, present and future. I really encourage you all to acknowledge, perhaps in the chat, where you're meeting from and the lands that you, from around the country, that you are joining us from. And having said that, I would also really like to welcome Kim to our webinar. I can't see you yet, Kim. There you come.
Hi, everyone.
So, Kim, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Kim Bradbury. I'm the Director of Winbring Jidda Childcare in Whyalla in South Australia, which is about 400 kilometres from Adelaide. I'd like to acknowledge that this land that I am meeting on today is the traditional lands of the Bangla people, and I respect the spiritual relationship with country. I also acknowledge the Bangla people as the custodians of the northwestern Upper Spencer Gulf region, and that the Bangla people's heritage and cultural beliefs are still as important as the living Bangla people today. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks, Kim. When we were preparing for this, you were talking about acknowledgement and how important that is, and you told me the story about the children's books and what you do with the children when you're reading them stories. Do you want to?
Yeah. So when we have nap time and we're learning a new story from part of our country, we always acknowledge where it is from, because just because it's a dreaming story, it doesn't mean that it belongs to the whole of Australia. That particular story might belong to an area. So we'll look on there and we'll look on the map and see where it was written and the people that it belongs to, just out of respect.
Yeah. Thanks, Kim. That's great. And that's something that I hadn't thought of before. So I think that, and the way that you connect the children with using the map as well is a really important learning for all children as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I guess that leads us to the next part of what we'd like to just spend a little bit of time talking about, is making sure that this is a safe place for all of us to participate in. At KidsMatter, we talk about mental health and wellbeing, and part of that is taking care of ourselves. And so one of our KidsMatter ways is this make safe idea, and this visual representation of is one of our KidsMatter symbols called Make Safe, and it really tries to highlight how important it is that when we talk about mental health and when we yarn about mental health and well-being, we take care, we practice self-care. The other thing I guess is really important is that we look after each other, and particularly when we're talking in a space about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, perhaps, that idea of cultural safety is really important. So I really wanted to acknowledge that right at the beginning and talk about that right at the beginning, so that we're making sure that we're really respectful, and that there might be some feelings or some thoughts that come up for us all, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of those in ourselves, but also with each other. And also that when we're learning from each other about different ways of knowing, being and doing, that we need to consider that cultural safety, that other people will have different ways of knowing, being and doing that aren't the same as ours. And in this space we sometimes do feel a bit uncomfortable. Kim, when we talked before, you were talking about how important it is to be culturally safe. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
So when we were talking before, we were talking about how we develop partnerships with families, so acknowledging them, learning their names, who belongs to their kinship group, so if you know, so nannies, aunties, things like that. Respecting cultural practices that may occur, so if families have to go away for family business, then you just respect that, you don't question it. And for our services, if people go away, then we give them a couple of weeks where we might give their care to someone else in that time. And then if we haven't heard from them, I'll try and contact them somehow, see how they're going, feeling, and then see if they when they can return or if they are returning. Because different communities have different protocols, and we have to respect that. Also, just being positive with families. Not looking at all the negatives all the time. And like at our centre, I'm Auntie Kim or Nana Kim, depends which child's saying it. And so that's just being respectful as well.
I was thinking in our Learning on Country ebook, which that talks about cultural safety and some things about culturally safe places, and I think that's one of the really things, hopefully what people will do while we're having this yarn is they'll really reflect on what they do and how they do it and what their ways of knowing, doing and being are. But in our Learning on Country, culturally safe places value culture really highly, recognise country and peoples, which is what we've already talked about, provide spaces for belonging, being, becoming, reflect culture, and I think that's really important that children see and families see themselves there, involve people in things that are important to them, are welcoming, and also connect to community support. So, but you also touched on that idea of, protocols and knowing and understanding how things are done and the ways things are done, and respecting that.
And don't always assume that it's gonna be asked or told things, because some things you don't need to know. You just respect that.
Yeah, that's an important message, isn't it?
Yeah, and don't assume that if do you have an educator at your service or a community member that you can go to them for anything that you might need to know, because they may not tell you because it's not your business. It just belongs to their community or their family. Yeah. You were talking also when we were chatting before about if you have an Aboriginal educator working with you or an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander educator working with you, how important it is to make sure that make the environment safe for them too. Yeah. It is. It's really important, and acknowledge and respect them as well. Like, they're not just there as a resource to use whenever you like, and value them because they are a valuable asset for your service.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that, Kim. I think what we might do is now move on to finding out onto our yarn a bit more. We've already started to yarning really, but so we're going to start off with finding out what you all know about yarning. If you haven't been to a KidsMatter webinar before, you won't know about our polls, but those of you who have, so we'll start the poll now to find out what you know about yarning and whether you've yarned before. So jump on and have a go. It's a multiple choice response, so you can respond more than once if you want to. So I can see some people who know that yarning's important, and some people who have already yarned, but also some people who are not sure and who haven't heard the term before. So we've got a real mix of responses to yarning. So, and I guess what we're trying to do is, before we jump into having a bit more of a yarn, we're going to really talk about yarning and what it might mean to people and how they understand it as well. So just give you a little bit more time. While you're doing that, you might also see on the screen we've got a hashtag. So one of the things we're hoping to do is continue this yarn in our social media spaces, either while you're on the webinar, and I know there are some people who can multitask and do lots of things at once. So if you want to jump onto Twitter and or Facebook and add some thoughts or comments or questions, use this Yarning with KidsMatter Twitter hashtag. Do that. Otherwise, we're really hoping that it will continue beyond just today's webinar too. So keep that hashtag in mind, and yeah, get yarning with us, and keep a lookout for it too. So we're going to try and pull some of all our thoughts and ideas together. So we might stop the poll now, but it looks like that people have a fairly strong sense of that yarning is really important to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. While we're just finishing off that yarn, so we'll just close the poll. We've got a question from Vicky and Kim. I'm wondering if we can have Kim back up, because there's a question from Vicky about how do we find out about what protocols to follow to be respectful. It's a good question, and something that some people get really anxious and worried about.
Yeah, I think maybe if there's someone in your community that you could go to ask, or there might be some service that you could go to. So like in South Australia, we have the Aboriginal Resource Unit, and they're always there if they could, if you need to help, maybe they could help with protocols, because just because you're in one community doesn't mean that you know what's the protocol for the next community. I guess I'm lucky because I work in an Aboriginal community controlled service, and we've got lots of connections with our community. So yeah, and those people aren't always there either. So I guess you're learning along the way.
Yeah, keep trying, I guess, is important. Yeah, just keep, I know Vicky's still asking that question, so just keep that in mind, and we might touch back on that in a minute, because I think it's a really important question to consider if you feel like you can't find any local places to go to. But like Kim said, there are sometimes some organisations more broadly that can help. Snake's probably a really good one to start. I mean, I know that's not local, but that's certainly an early childhood organisation. Yeah. So as we saw before from the poll, some people know a little bit about yarning and they know it's really important. But we want to just, before we talk any more about it, we wanted to kind of have a bit of a yarn about what yarning means. So Kim, do you want to talk about what yarning means to you and why you think it's important?
To me, yarning means lots of conversations, and they could be one-on-one or in a group or out in the community. So just because you work in a service doesn't mean you don't yarn to community members not outside. Yarning can happen in circles, yeah, like on the mat. I've just been on placement, and we had the children were in a circle, and I thought of yarning straight away, and they were doing like an activity. So that's yarning as well. So yeah, yarning has different ways in different areas. Yarning can happen when people decide, like groups might decide what's going to happen in their community. So they might sit in a group and discuss how things make decisions for their communities, and it's inclusive, so everyone's at the same eye contact, eye level, sorry, and so that everyone now has a voice.
Yeah, those it's interesting you're saying about those things about yarning too, because I hadn't ever thought of it like that before, but everybody's at the same level, and actually physically at the same level, so sitting around in the circle, not, kind of some on chairs and some at the back, but everyone's included in that circle. The other thing that's important to me too, it's fairly informal kind of way, but like you said, yarning, you can have really important business to talk about, even though it kind of feels like an informal conversation.
Yeah.
I think
it's really important that you're all equal. And it's good for your well-being.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. The other thing I reckon that's really important about yarning too is about listening, and so waiting for your turn and really hearing what someone else has to say.
That's a trait that people need, and it's an important trait to have when you're communicating and developing relationships, and also building trust in the community.
That's one thing I have to work on too, because I often will come in with, something to say or something to ask or something I want to talk about, but actually that's not the best way to try and connect or try and make relationships. It's better to stop and to listen and to hear. You're smiling.
Yeah. Very important.
Well, on the screen, people will see one of our other KidsMatter ways, and this is our conversation symbol, and so it kind of really reflects what yarning looks like for us. So in the middle is a representation of a flannel flower, which is the symbol for mental health in Australia, and it's a really resilient native flower. But around the conversation about mental health, which is what the flannel flower represents, are all different conversations and all different perspectives. And I think that's the other thing that happens with yarning, or that I understand about yarning, is that it kind of goes in a circle and it goes out and then comes back in and then goes out and can come back in with that kind of focus. So for KidsMatter, yarning or conversation is also a really important way, and like you said, it's really important for our mental health as well. One of the next important aspects, I guess, of yarning. Do you want to say anything else about yarning, Kim?
No, I think you've got that right. So yarning it doesn't have to be verbal either.
Ah, that's important too, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you want to talk more about that?
People could be walking down the street and have a symbol, and people know what's going on. So it doesn't mean you have to talk.
Yeah.
And even in our setting, it might be with some of our Aboriginal educators, might not be talking to children, but they're still communicating because of the whole body language.
Yeah, so those non-verbal cues are really important, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because I watch my children play with their friends, and I see them communicate and work out all sorts of important things about rules, about games and stuff like that without saying anything. And they're communicating all that in non-verbally, but they can work stuff out really well. We tend to, or what I've done is focus on talking more as I've gotten older. Children are good at it.
Or it could be from drawing.
Mm.
Yes, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be sign, body language. All that. It could be drawings, and that's how we interpret people a bit shy about talking. So just having a platform like a big sheet of paper, and people can feed back in a group just by writing or drawing on that piece of paper. That's another important tool.
Mm. Yeah, it is. One of the other things I think, and that's what I want to talk about next, is that's fundamental to yarning, and we've already touched on it as well, is that idea of relationships and how critical relationships are in being able to yarn and also back to when we were talking about making safe, like relationships are really critical. And I think this is my little thing that I think is really important, though, that in early childhood we know that relationships are important. We say that they're important, and that are at the heart of our work. But sometimes we're not very intentional about how we do relationships or how we see other people doing relationships. We don't really think about it in a really thoughtful, careful way. And I really learned this idea about responsibilities that come with relationships from, we've got one of our KidsMatter action charts talks about, is called this, responsibilities come with relationships. And when I went to visit a Aboriginal school, and we were looking at the action chart and we were yarning about it, and they said to me, "Oh, that's so true." In the group they've got some children who are an auntie and a niece and nephew, and so they would expect different relationship dynamics between those children because even though they're the same age, the auntie has particular responsibilities because of her role as an auntie. So, you know, that notion of responsibility in relationships is really important. That really made me realise how important it is.
It really is, because you've got to understand about the there you go again, protocols around relationships, and that happens. You know, in the remote communities might be completely different. Those relationships, how they are acted on compared to like in our community. So there could be protocols around how that person reacts to that person. We've got little, 3-year-olds that are uncles to 5-year-olds.
Just someone from the chat has just said, so, and this is an interesting one in terms of our responsibility in relationships with families is about, they have a family who doesn't identify as Aboriginal or doesn't talk about their Aboriginality. And so the person perhaps is asking, so how do we navigate that? What are our responsibilities in that space?
Yeah, I think
do you want to?
So they've got their reasons why they don't identify as Aboriginal, and I think we've had families like that over the years, and I've worked in early childhood over 20 years, and I've seen that a few times. Could be grief and loss there with that family, but we don't know when they'll have to ask us to you if they do, and just have to respect their decision not to identify as Aboriginal.
It goes back to the make safe thing too, doesn't it? It is about not making them talk about it, but making them feel safe with whatever they want to disclose and whatever they're allowed to talk about too. Like you said, I think that point that you talk about is there's as many protocols around what you can say as what you can't say, and you just have to go with the person and take the cues from that person.
Yeah, and if someone's told you something, then you just have to respect that, unless someone comes back with a strong argument about why that was wrong or whatever.
And that might happen. I mean, and I think that's the tricky bit that's in this space, because different people have got different views about things, or because they're from different places too.
Yeah. We've got a question there about eye contact.
I was thinking about that when we were talking.
And that's also, like you said, 16-year-olds, that's okay, but the elders say no, and that's the elders, that's their thing, but the 16-year-olds obviously comfortable with it, so how people have been brought up.
So what do you do in that space? So you just go with a 16-year-old, it's okay, but with the elders you certainly wouldn't.
No, you wouldn't look at the elders because you know that you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So, but you can with the 16-year-old.
Yeah.
It's probably just been brought up different than the elders was brought up.
Yeah.
And no eye contact, just being respectful. It doesn't mean they're arrogant or disrespecting you. It just means that they're respecting you.
Yeah. And Rita's just mentioned too that, you know, there's that idea that Aboriginal, while we're trying, I'm saying we, I'm a white person, while I'm trying to understand more about Aboriginal ways of knowing, doing and being, Aboriginal people are, you know, we're both trying to kind of work together a bit. And that, I think that's where the responsibility comes as well, is that there is a huge responsibility that I have as a white person to foster relationships and work on them and continue to hopefully make it safe enough.
Yeah, I think that's true. And also, if say in our community there's an area where we don't take children to on an excursion, and then there's people in the town that take children there on excursions. So even though I've told them we don't take our children there, I'm not going to tell them why. You know, they disrespect that and take them there. So they whatever they choose. But
yeah, it is, but it's not culturally safe. Like that is disrespectful and an unsafe thing, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's interesting you're saying that, because I remember when I was getting this ready, I was trying to get a picture of, I thought I might use a picture of Whyalla, and then I went, you know what, I'm not going to, because I'm not sure which bits I remember you telling me that, and I couldn't remember which bit. I knew it was a hill, but I didn't know which bit, so yeah. And I thought, I'm just not going to, because it's not my place to do that. I need to not do that. Yeah, I guess so. That's right. So, do you want to say any more about relationships, or do you want to talk a little bit now about what's happened at Wrapup?
Okay. So,
you ready?
Yeah. Are you going to? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Wrapup, we started off KidsMatter a couple of years ago, and I met Sarah at an Aboriginal State Services Network meeting. So they're meetings that we would have twice or 3 times a year in South Australia with the BBS services. So they're budget-based funded services, early childhood with an Aboriginal perspective. And these services have been running around 30 years at the moment. And Sarah came to our meeting to talk about KidsMatter, and I'd never heard of it before. And I went away thinking about how it actually would fit in our philosophy and support our families to continue with having a caring and safe environment for our children to continue to learn and grow. Later, Sarah contacted me, and we had a few phone conversations. And then each time she spoke to me, the more it had me thinking about how this would be a great tool that we could use at our service. And then finally, Sarah came and visited us at Wrapup, and everything fell into place. At that meeting, I asked one of our educators, Lauren, if she'd like to be a part of the meeting, and I looked at her strengths as she was really good in supporting families and children's wellbeing. Lauren is actually a non-Aboriginal person, but she really connects with the ways of knowing and being. And then with that, we thought that she would be a great asset to bring this project to life. We've got many children that need additional support at our service, not just educational, but lots of wellbeing things. And we decided that we wouldn't use the word mental health because there's always a stigma attached to that, so we just focus on wellbeing, so we don't put up any of the posters that have mental health on it because of a lot of the concepts around what's happening in those families. So we started off with the floor book, and we looked at our philosophy, and we started matching it up with the key ideas within KidsMatter. So grow, learn new ways, make safe, consider and celebrate. Conversation, be, feel, think and do. Our philosophy also supported KidsMatter guiding principles of children developing mental health within sensitive, nurturing and responsive relationships, and families and recognising the importance of children's lives plays essential to help optimise children's well-being. Parent-child development occurs in a range of diverse families. Parent-child development occurs in a range of diverse families. Each of the key ideas connected with what was already happening in our service, but then it was really identified and strengthened that we were on the right track with supporting families and children. For example, make it safe. We looked at our environment and we had already begun to create a garden, like a kitchen garden, and we had also been talking to children about being healthy. So we created a No Bully at Wisdom Jitter book, which is bully is smoking. And Grow, we work with children about being healthy, exercising, being outside, and also eating healthy and washing the mouth with hands. Within our community, we make links with other different services. So we're right next door to the Aboriginal Health Centre, so we're quite lucky there. And we've got links to other community services that can support those families. And we also participate in community events, so NAIDOC Week. We have displays at the hospital, displays at the show, and we always showcase our culture within those displays, and we celebrate it every day. We celebrate our culture every day by conversation. We learn many ways, acknowledge, consider and celebrate. And that we acknowledge that we're at present being on Bungalow land. We share stories of children. We include families in our program and have lots of conversations with many families every day. We teach children about the importance of family, being strong in the culture, and this includes extended family members as well. And sometimes we do this using mind maps with the children and also building their strong sense of identity. We acknowledge the ways of knowing, being and doing at our service. So on one of those slides there was pictures of our displays, and we also support our non-Indigenous staff to understand the ways of knowing and being. And like we said before, we also know that ways of knowing and being, a key thing is being a good listener. And without these skills, we don't develop the relationships that we need for children to grow and trust. And I think our next step, which we're hoping will happen soon, is maybe we'll go and do a bush excursion so we can connect to land and culture, just to do like a risk assessment, but I'm sure the pros outweigh the cons. The excursion in one of those slides was we went to the beach.
I'll show you that in a minute. I just wanted to let people know that what we're watching now while Kim's talking is the floor book that you guys created, so it kind of reflects a lot of the things that Kim's been talking about, and this is the way that you've kind of, or Lauren did a lot of this work, and she pulled it all together and shared some of all the, your KidsMatter journey. So that's what's been playing in the background. So we'll go back to the slide though, because you were talking about the excursion, and we've got a little image here of this excursion to the beach. Do you want to talk about? You were going to talk about that now?
Yeah. So we used some of the funding to go to a beach which is about 20 minutes away, and actually it's connected to the bungalow people. So there is the story there about singing to the sharks, and it's at our Maritime Museum. There's a big display on it, and we took the children there. We went and had lunch, and the children were allowed to explore for about an hour. There was lots of things happening on the beach, and it was so calm, peaceful. The staff had commented how calm it was. There was lots of collaboration. There wasn't much conversation with the children, but there was lots happening. And those children, one of the children on the bus obviously doesn't go on the bus much because he asked, are we going to Kalgoorlie? We're going a long way away. But yeah, it was a very enjoyable experience being connected to land.
Mm. And I think when you started talking about that, one of the things that we started having this conversation about was how well-being, when you shared that story about the children on the beach, you were talking about how important it was for their well-being, because some of these children in the centre, they're all over the place because of, all sorts of reasons. But when they're on the beach, they were different children. And so the importance for them was really important. It was really important. But then we started having that more broad conversation about how important wellbeing is for everybody, not just, for the kids, but for the educators. They were calmer.
I think even the bus driver was calmer.
Not always like that, hey?
Well, we hired the bus, but I thought, yeah, he probably looked like he was sitting on the rocks just watching and...
Yeah, so just waiting, yeah.
I think it's like you go and you get rid of all that cobwebs that are sitting there for your mind. Yeah.
So being connected with land and country is a really important way of doing that, isn't it?
Let them take their shoes off and run in the sand and feel it. And, it was beautiful.
Did you talk to the kids about that, or did they just do it?
They just did it. We talked about where we were going and where it was and why it was important to our community. And
okay, so you talked about the place and why the place was important. Yeah.
And then we went there and they were just so excited. And that those children who have difficulty with self-regulation actually calmed down. It was really beautiful to watch. Yeah.
The KidsMatter symbol that you see here on the screen as well is our think, feel, do and be symbol. And so, it kind of captures all those areas of well-being and mental health, about your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your actions, and how they're all integral to your mental health and well-being. And like you said, it's really important for us to do that, to take care of ourselves and take time for ourselves as well. I was thinking also there's that idea of how important it is to take care of the land too, and be respectful of the land as well, and the country.
Taking what you want. So we always talk to our children about only taking what you need. You don't break branches of trees, so that sustainability is linked to culture as well.
Mm. But it doesn't mean you can't. Oh, you go.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so you can. It doesn't mean you can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's 2 questions there about yarning circles.
Yeah, do you want to respond to them?
Yep. So Shauna M says, when you have a yarning circle, do you always start with welcome to country? Well, you don't, but it would be respectful if you did.
Do you want to mention, though, about the difference between welcome and acknowledgement, though? Because I think that's really important.
So welcome is when a local person welcomes you to their country, and an acknowledgement is when someone who's not from that country acknowledges the land where we are, which is what we did today. I'm a Palawa woman, and so I acknowledge that I'm on Bangla land because I'm not from this country. Jessica C says, would it be appropriate to call our discussion group yarning circle? Yes, it would be. It'd be very respectful as well. The kids like that.
Yeah. Well, I think we've got a blog post. We have got a blog post about a couple, I think, of services who use yarning circles. And there's a really beautiful one about how special it is and how they incorporate. They often will use they do their yarning outside, and so there's a special place for where the yarning happens as well. So it can be kind of ritualised and formalised and made special like that. But it can be informal as well, Kim, too, with the if you're doing it with children.
Yeah. I've just been, well, we had I'm in a sports team, and we had a meeting out on a sports ground the other day, and we all sat in a circle with, you don't realise, and I think, oh my God, this is a yarning circle as well. So just to discuss things, everyone's sitting around, and we have a children's centre here in Whyalla, and they've actually got an area where they've set up purposely for yarning circles.
Yeah. So you can formalise it and make it, a formal place, or you can just do it, spontaneously anywhere. And that's the idea of yarning circles. But we were talking before about just yarning, which is, and I guess yarning is what you do in a yarning circle. But you can just yarn. You were talking. I reckon when we were talking about this, you were saying, you meet a family down the street and you'd have a yarn with them.
It doesn't have to be a circle.
Yeah.
Yarning's just conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that element of listening is really important.
Yeah, it is.
Mm. All right. So we've been talking about wellbeing. So we wanted to ask everybody now about how they're feeling. And you might be feeling more than one thing, or you might be feeling 2 or 3 things. So while we're doing that, there's another question about yarning circles. Charmaine's asked a similar kind of question there, Kim. Can you see that?
Oh, yes. So, yeah, you don't have to talk about Aboriginal things in a yarning circle. You could do anything. You could share a story. You could do show and tell. Yeah, it doesn't have to be cultural. It's just a great tool to use.
Yeah, and I guess that's what we've been talking about, isn't it? Is that it's actually a pedagogy. It's a way of doing something. But if you call it a yarn, then you are honouring the Aboriginal pedagogy or an Aboriginal way of doing things, instead of drawing on another pedagogical approach that you might have used before. It's good to see no one, other than a couple of people are bored. That's no good. I'm sorry about that. But some people are eager as well. And, I think a number of things happen. I guess one of the reasons why we were asking about, we can probably close the poll now, some people are keen, so that's really good. And some people are actually feeling calm and obviously taking care of their own well-being as well. So that's great. What I'd like to do now is to really encourage you to think about what you're going to do next. And Kim, you touched on that a little bit. So I'll ask you again in a little bit about what your plans for what next are. But if you would like to share with us what your ideas and plans are, or those of you who are joining us, if you click onto the web page, it will open up a new tab in your browser. And it will take you to our shared thinking blog, which is where all of the things to do with this webinar will be housed after the webinar. And you can make a comment and share your ideas and plans that you've got going on in your head right now, which would be great for us to hear, and also would part of that yarning together and talking beyond now. The other thing, though, I'd really encourage you to do is continue to do that after today. So to head back there and see what other people have suggested, because there you'll get some more ideas as well. So if you do click out, it will take you to another page. So don't forget but it should just open in another tab, so you will be able to come back to us. But while you're doing that, Kim, do you want to talk about maybe what your ideas for what next are?
So for us, we were going to continue. There's some tools with KidsMatter, and you can look at them, the different concepts, and then see how you could look at implant that in your service. One of the things we've discussed for a while now is we're going to take the children to a bush setting. So hopefully that happens. There's so many things going on that we're going to try and do that and take them so they can walk on country in a different setting.
Yeah.
and then we'll add that to our floor book.
And put some more comments in your floor book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about what you've been doing, and what your staff have been doing too just recently about with all your qualifications and your training and stuff? Because I think that, I mean, I know it's not related directly to KidsMatter, but it kind of fits with that, or do you not want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I've had 3 of our Aboriginal staff who've been completing their diploma, and 2 weeks ago they went for their graduation, so they're now qualified, and they also have been a part of, like myself, remote Indigenous professional development program, where they're learning to become pedagogical leaders, or mentors to start with, and now 2 of them are leaders, and they're going to be presenting some training in South Australia, which is the early years framework using Aboriginal perspectives. So it's lots of yarning circles and things like that, and it's really breaking down the early years framework, but in an understanding way, and using tools like art and discussion to build on people's knowledge, because not everyone learns out of a book and these things, so that's for everybody actually. I've also been a pedagogical leader. I was a mentor, and then I'm a leader, so I've co-presented some training in South Australia on the early years framework, and at the moment we're working on a research project which is going really well, and we're hoping to present at the conference in the Gold Coast, ACER conference.
Yeah. I remember, and I know you said as we were talking, you've been surprised that people are interested in hearing about Aboriginal pedagogies or Aboriginal ways of doing, knowing, doing and being. But I think people are, and it's interesting because Lisa's just written, it's reassuring when you realise that in your school you've got opportunities for yarning. It's there, you just didn't realise that's what you were doing. And I think that, I guess that's one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conversation, and why you're a really great person to have it with, Kim, because, you know, the knowledge that you have around Aboriginal pedagogy is really important, but when we can share that with each other and have conversations about those things in a safe way, drawing on all that stuff we've kind of talked on today, you know, making sure it's safe enough, making sure that we have relationships and that we continue to work on our relationships and are responsible in those relationships, and that we can yarn about it, then, you know, we can feel more confident, I guess, and feel like Lisa said, you know, oh, we can do this, it's exciting.
And you as an educator feel safe too.
Mm.
Yeah. But don't assume that Aboriginal educators know everything.
No. Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I heard something this morning on the, I don't know, somewhere, as I was getting ready today, and, you know, that notion that we don't know, we never know everything, and no one's going to know everything, and as we learn together, I think that's going to be the important thing.
We're learning every day, and yeah, we're learning from the children, the family. Each child comes with their own knowledge.
Mm.
Yeah. Don't assume they don't know things. They probably know more about things than we do.
Yeah, so there's lots of powerful knowledge from children as well, isn't there? We haven't really talked about that very much.
Every time we get a new family, I always get excited about all the whole staff do, about where they're from and who's their family and who's connected to who. And sometimes we always feel people come to our centre for a reason. I think that I feel lucky to be in our environment.
Yeah. So Nicole's asked again, there's those questions about yarning circles. We'll move on to the next one in a sec. But do you want to respond to that? Nicole said, you know, do we need to get permission to call it a yarning circle?
No, you don't. You don't need to call it a yarning circle. You don't have to have permission to call it that.
Yeah. I think it's still, and we didn't go back to Virginia's question. I think it was Virginia that asked it right at the beginning of that. So if you can't find somewhere to connect with, I think you have to continue to keep searching, and maybe that's the work that you need to do if you can't find who to ask, because there might be some places that say, it's not okay to call it a yarning circle, but you need to find, find the right people and keep looking. I reckon our ebook Learning on Country has got some really great suggestions for thinking about how you might do that. And these are some of our KidsMatter resources that you might want to make use of to help you with that as well.
The action charts are really good.
Yeah, when we talked about the action charts, that my favourite one is that responsibilities with relationships. But the action charts share all the KidsMatter concepts and ideas in a visual way, and we've talked about how important that is, Kim. That it doesn't have to be verbal.
Right.
Yeah, and the podcasts are the same kind of things as well.
Yeah.
So that when you the podcasts are a range of stories that share the KidsMatter messages as well, and you can listen to them as a podcast. Just to let you know too, if you're keen to click on them now and find out about them now, the links are live, so if you click on them, they'll open up in a new tab as well. So just as we're, I guess, thinking about finishing, Kim, have you got something that you would like to kind of, as a bit of a summary or a highlight from the webinar? Or
I think it's important to acknowledge, because I think that often things are tokenistic. So services might have, or anywhere might have, a map of Australia with the countries on it, or they might have an Aboriginal flag up. It doesn't really mean that they respect cultural ways of knowing and being. So, KidsMatter has been a good tool to use to support what we already do, and I think that it would be, if you were interested, I'm sure that that would be an asset to the service. And it's been a good journey for us, and some of the things, it's just been us acknowledging what we already do, so I'm sure that would be the same for everybody else.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because that's certainly one of the ideas of KidsMatter, or the aims of KidsMatter, is to validate and acknowledge for people that good early childhood practice is actually really good practice for mental health as well. So KidsMatter aims to do that, and I guess what we've tried to show you today is that there's a whole range of not just resources but ways of doing things that really honour Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander pedagogies or ways of doing things. That you can bring to your work as well, but it's really important, and I guess that's that idea of tokenistic, to really make them part of what you do. Requires our own learning, and I'm saying our own, not myself as a non-Aboriginal person, to really understand more about what it means and what it looks like, and really practice using those ways as well, because they're not ways that perhaps I'm more familiar with, but not taking them over, because they're not mine, they don't belong to me, but to be really respectful and honour the sharing that Aboriginal people have shared their ways with me as well, like you. And I think one of the things that I really value about our relationship too, Kim, is the fact that it's really important that you can tell me when it's not appropriate or when it's not okay, and that's as important as telling me the good things and when it is okay.
We've had those conversations.
We have, and then, that.
Just respect each other's ways of things.
Yeah. But it all takes time, and I guess we haven't talked about that very much, but, it's really important to be very respectful of the time it can take, and not to want to make it happen straight away or to happen in your own time frame.
That's every family as well, because it might take a while before they build up trust in that relationship, and then then they let you know some things that they need help with. So they're going to tell you straight some things that they need help with. So they're going to tell you straight up when things or how things are.
And again, it feels a bit like a circle, like there's a little bit and then you get maybe a little bit more, but you have to maintain that.
Yeah. And it's a bit like I think we talked about that before this, about the Bronson-Brenner model and how, the child's the nucleus and then all those community bits are all on the outside and they're all important. So if something happens with mum or nana, then there's nana that will back it up, or if something was there, we might give them more support. So it still holds the child up and looks after their well-being.
Yeah, we did talk about that when we were getting this ready, weren't we? And because you brought it up, and I said, Ron from Brenda's at the core of KidsMatter as well, so it kind of fits, together both ways.
Yeah.
Good. Well, it looks like we don't have too many more questions, Kim. So I just want to, and we're nearly to the end. So I would really like to thank everybody, particularly you, Kim, for joining me today from Whyalla and sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us. And I really appreciate it, Kim. Thank you so much. I'd also like to thank everybody in the chat for their questions and their thoughts and their comments. I haven't had a chance to have a look at all of those yet, but the ones that have been shared with us have been great. If you, as I said, as we've talked about already, if you want to continue this conversation, if you're not a participating KidsMatter service, you might want to find out a bit more about KidsMatter, go on the website and have a look. If you are a KidsMatter participating service, you might want to really give some thought as to how you might be able to use this KidsMatter webinar to reflect on what you've already been doing with KidsMatter and how you've already been progressing with KidsMatter. You might want to also engage with the framework implementation tool, which will help you document and record some of your progress and see how this webinar might connect in with that as well. So, and if you're not sure what I'm talking about, then you need to connect with your facilitator and have a yarn with them about the webinar too. But it might be worthwhile doing that anyway. So, continue the conversation in whatever way you can, because I think it's an important conversation to be having, and I think it's one that we need to keep having, not to finish up. So don't forget the hashtag yarning with KidsMatter. So hop over onto Facebook and or Twitter if you're keen to do that now, and don't forget to continue chatting on our blog as well. But I think we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for your time and for coming. Thanks again, Kim, and I'll chat with you again soon. Oh, don't forget the survey.